Hello, welcome back. My name is David, and we are continuing our tour of vintage Gillette shaving razors. So, we are, after going through non-Gillette razors and super speeds, we are now finally starting in the beginning. So, I was going to do a lot more razors in this one, but even just the super speeds alone was like 30 minutes long. So, I'm going to try and focus in on a bit fewer razors and see if we can't get that video time down a little bit. So I'm going to start off discussing the double ring. The double ring would be probably the biggest collection or biggest piece of my collection that's missing from the very early razors. The double ring is basically the same as the single ring. It just has two rings. So I would like to have one. There's been chances that have popped up, but usually they sell for 500 or more dollars, somewhere around there. And for me, the whole point of collecting is the find. That's really what makes it a lot of fun for me. You know, imagine you were just uber rich and you could just tell your assistant to find and buy everything for you. They probably could, and it wouldn't be as fun. And so if I was willing to throw endless money at it, I would have one. But what I'd rather do is find one someday at a antique store or a bazaar or a estate sale or something like that. And to me, that hunt is a lot of fun. So I'm not going to throw $600 on adding it, but I will talk about them. So the very first Gillette razor had like a smooth barrel to it. I'm going to put up a picture of there from Mr. Razor, and I'll leave a link to find out more about him. But he has a fantastic collection. And so the original one, there's three known, owned by three of the original founders, and all three of which are now owned by Gillette and their razor archives. And then from there, they made their first commercial version of that. And we know from various writings that the very first ones came out in a white cardboard box. There are no known examples of that. So people often ask in collections, what would be the Grail razor? And for me, I suppose that would be the closest I can think of to the Grail razor that could be attained, that's not owned by the corporation or something. That particular white box, I've never seen an example, and there's not any known. So, but after that, they made a litho tin. It was a really pretty litho tin, and I'll put up a picture of that too. And those are very hard to find. Usually if you find the litho tin, the tin is empty. Someone used it to hold keepsakes in or something. There was one that popped up on eBay that was in really beautiful shape. The inside of the box had all the velvet and all the things you would expect for the razors, holding the blade banks. And that sold for $1,700. So a little bit out of my ballpark. I believe it was bought by Matt Pisarcik of Razor Emporium. And for him, that's a business expense. So it makes a little more sense. And he literally has every razor. So that's the kind of buyer for something like that. So for mine, well, then you have the normal double ring. And that comes in a box that looks just like this. Of course, the only difference is I only have the single ring. Now, this particular single ring from the date code, and I'll link where you can look up date codes, mine is a 1905. So in 1905, there was still double rings being made. So this would have been the latter half of 1905. So it's very close to a double ring, but not quite. So you have the side clasp here, which is unique to the old double rings and single rings that followed right afterwards. And you have sharp and dull blade banks. Now, the reason for this is when people were still very used to keep dropping their razors, keeping their razors. The idea of something being disposable was still very new and unusual. And in fact, Gillette even had to have a buyback type program to where you would send your dull blades in and you send in X amount of dull blades and they would give you a couple of new sharp ones. so you didn't feel like you were wasting it. And I'm sure they recycled the metal, but it was mostly just a way of making people feel comfortable with disposable items. So on an older single ring, or double ring for that matter, you're generally going to find the serial number inside on this one locking piece here. So in this case, very much doubt you're going to see this on camera, but the date's going to be in there. You'll also notice that on the back half of an older razor, you're not going to see the Gillette diamond logo, because that didn't come out until, let me look it up here, 1908 would be the first time you see the diamond logo. So in this case, I'm not going to have one of those. This one's pretty clean because I cleaned it up, and I do shave with this one often. I'm often asked if I shave with all of my razors, and yes and no. At first, for sure, but as you can see, I have a lot of old types, and they're all pretty much the same. So at this point, I kind of like leaving some of the initial patina on it. So here I have a 1906 standard set. As you can see, there's a cursive logo. So we still haven't gotten to the diamond logo, which came out in 1908. And this razor also will not have any logos on it. And the date code is also going to be right here on this inside handle. So one thing all of the old types have in common is you have these stabilizer pins, and you have your center pin. So the initial blades that came out were made specifically for that. They came in a nice little wax coated box here. Remind you, no honing, no stropping, no need. And considering this is well over 100 years old, a pretty nice way to package them. So here we have a couple of the blades themselves. These would be post 1908. You have a couple of blades here. We're going to go ahead and open one and show you what that would look like. Anytime you're dealing with these old blades, you want to be very careful because they are still sharp. This has a number 243 on it, and there is a way to actually look up the dates of the old blades. If I can find it, I'll link that as well. So this would fit just right over those three holes. Go. Tighten it down. And these ones are a lot thicker than the blades we're used to. So you really got to get in there and tighten it down. In fact, they kind of consider that a little bit adjustable, because you could loosen it up a little bit and the blade would maintain its integrity. You could somewhat change your shave angle, and some of their early advertisements even brag about that. I have tried one of these blades before, and I would not recommend that. I'm not sure if it's age or just much better manufacturing processes now, but these are not very comfortable blades. Although I'm sure when they were first made, they would have been a little bit nicer, and at the time would have been pretty nice compared to whatever else was available. Okay. So this particular style, people like this. People tend to get kind of hung up on whatever they were using. And so Gillette kept this style for quite a while, even after they came out with the razors that have the removable handle and cap, and we'll go over that in a bit, but they still kept the style around. For example, I've got a 1917 here, and a 1918. They're very similar, just a little bit of writing, and of course the date goes inside the razor, kind of give that away too. I'm not sure that these blade banks are the exact right ones. It's possible the initial one could have come with these metal banks, but it can kind of come both ways, and when I got it, that's what was in there. So again, you're meant to have dull and sharp, although it's not specifically telling you which one's which. So I guess you would just remember these are sharp and that's dull. So these, you get used to something, you want to keep it. They're going to keep making it for a while to appeal to those clients. Now, I mentioned that I don't shave with all of my razors anymore. And the reason is, well, there's 4 old types right here. Here's another old type. And this one has a really nice patina. Like the patina on it is pretty even. It's not all spotty, and it kind of gives it a gunmetal gray sort of color to it. And I like that. I feel like it displays really well. I think it kind of shows its age. I could definitely clean this area up down here a little bit. But I know the serial number on this. I know what boxes would fit it. And if I do find one that fits it, that's something I don't want to do, is display it with its proper box and leave it as is. I have one razor that I completely cleaned up and removed all signs of aging and all patina from, and that's my go-to shaving razor. The rest of them are all going to be the same shave, so there's no point in taking that out. That's my notes. Okay, so now let's go on to a little bit of change in form, and that would be the Bulldog. And the Bulldog is really cool. It still has basically the same head, slightly thicker, but essentially the same. You still have your 3 pins. They're still making the same blades that we just went through. But this is a bit heavier. It's got a nice barber pole design on it. And this one actually goes in a military set, which I'll cover in a different video. But I did want to show the Bulldog and a Bulldog travel case. So this one here, a lot of times the gold lettering in the box, I'm not totally sure if you can see that, so let me lift that up there. So your logo, if it's gold, the razor is gold. If it's silver, generally the razor is silver. So a lot of times you can pick out a mix match that way. So this Bulldog is gold. So you can see, same razor, it's a bit prettier, a bit more expensive. And these travel cases, these are really cool. You got to remember, Gillette first started because King Gillette himself was a traveling salesperson, and he wanted to have a way to shave while traveling on a train or going to different cities and not having to find a barber every time. So that was kind of the initial point. So a set like this is great for that. Because you have your razor, you have your sharp and dull blades, you have 2 nice little cases for that, keep blades in there. And you have these 2 tubes. Let's take a look here. So these tubes, one of them has a very small, you have a little push-up thing on the bottom here, very small brush. And I have used a brush that's a modern one made by Simpsons called the Wee Scott. And the Wee Scott fits perfectly in these tubes in case you were planning on using one and wanted to have a nice modern brush for it. And then your second tube is soap. I used to have an original thing of soap in a set that I had sold, but this is an example of what the soap would look like. I believe this is a spec soap. But what you do is you literally rub this on your wet face, into your whiskers. You get some soap in there. And then you take that brush and you whip that soap into a lather. And I have tried that. It does work. It's not my favorite, but it does work really well. There you go. You have an entire barbershop right there. Pretty luxurious one, really. You got soap, brush, a nice razor. So this one I was a little unsure about talking about today. This is called a big fellow, and this particular one is from, sorry, this is a Canadian one. This is from 1926, and most of the big fellows that you're going to see have a very different base plate. You see how this is kind of flat on the bottom versus the razors we've been going over, which have your curved head to it. So the difference being, this one feels a little heavier, but these are both very heavy razors. If I'm not mistaken, these are the heaviest razors Gillette ever made. So this old type, it looks like an old type, but man, it is thick. Far thicker than the normal old types, and even thicker than a Bulldog. So this Canadian old type, I like having this. This is, while it looks like an old type, it does shave a little differently. It is heavier. You've got to be careful not to use much pressure with this one. And finding slight differences in razors is a lot of what makes collecting fun. The American version here is almost a hybrid between the new and the old type, because the news don't have the stabilizer pin. Well, they do have the flat bottom to it. So this is sort of an interesting go-between sort of razor. So I just decided to include that, for today. And these also will have serial numbers, and they're right there on the base of the plate. And that particular serial number makes this a 1924 razor. So almost a century old, and still used to this day. And on a bit of a side note, I'll bring up the Goodwill razors. So these kind of go more with the three-piece old types, but I feel like I have enough room, so let's just go ahead and talk about these, because I have a lot of old types. So let's take a few things out of that video. So the Goodwills were from 1931 to 1935. And Gillette's main goal, of course, is to sell blades. And so this was 10 blades, and this entire box cost $1. And not a coincidence, 10 blades cost $1. So you're really just buying these blades, and these blades were specific to this set. You have 10 blades, and these are the Gillette News. And the head is pretty unique on a Goodwill. Let's take a look at this one. So you have much more like the new than the old type, but you do have these holes, and you have these stabilizer pins on the inside of the cap, which are a diamond shape. It's pretty cool since their logo is a diamond. And if you look at modern razors, which unfortunately I don't have one on me, but through the magic of editing, here's a picture of one. So you see that little zigzag that goes all the way through there? That is the result of all kinds of differences over all kinds of years making razors, until eventually there's so many different holes in those, I guess they decided that they would stop messing with it. And there are a lot of razors that will take advantage of just the diamonds. Some will do the diamonds plus stabilizers on the side, straight line, 3-pin. Everything works on those blades. So this is the first of the diamonds, and the cap is a little different. You have these areas in here to make room for those stabilizers. And Goodwills feel really loose when you put them together, because they are. But once you put it together with a blade, they become much tighter, and a lot of people very much prefer the unique shave of a Goodwill. So if you find one, it's definitely worth trying. This would have come in pretty much the same box, but I really like this one. This one's really cool. It's got kind of an Art Deco sort of design to the top of it. And the head itself is open. These are a little bit harder to find, but they also use that same diamond. And I just think these are really cool looking. Shave for me is pretty much the same as any other old type, but it just looks really cool. And then finally, I have a British Goodwill here. This looks very similar to our gold one here, except for you have circles instead of squares. The base plate is, I think, a little bit heavier. And this one in particular, I really like. This is one of my favorite for actual shaving. Just something about the way it comes together just really works for me. And so I use this one quite a bit. In fact, if you go back and if you happen to notice in my intro video, in the bottom drawer, this head was missing because I was actively using it at the time. It was in my bathroom. I didn't notice that. And I keep a handle in the bathroom. And so I'll just take the head out of whichever set I want to use. So that was actively being used back then. But here it is in its original case. And it's just got some nice cool designs on there. So that will do it for those. Next, I'm going to get into these old types. So you're going to have your handle that unscrews and your cap, although a little bit different than this, but those came in all kinds of different boxes. So that'll be a pretty fun one. And also after that probably will be the military razors. So stick with us and we'll see you again soon. Still made it too long.